Yo, what's going on, AP people? We have a brief video today brought to you by APUSH Review. It's a new website I've created with lots of videos, resources, everything you need to know to succeed in APUS. It is on nativism in the 1920s, a key topic for chapters 31 and 32, and almost something you will surely see on your APUSH exam. All right, let's do a quick review of nativism before we get to the 1920s, and let's discuss what nativism is. It is being hostile to immigrants, and it is motivated by ethnic tensions and religious bias. And religion is going to play a huge role in nativism, and predominantly it's going to be against Catholics. Let's review some prior examples of nativism throughout U.S. history that you have learned so far up to the 1920s. We have the Know Nothings in the 1850s. This was a political party, and their whole purpose was anti-immigration. And they were called the Know Nothings because members would say, "I know nothing," if you ask them about their political beliefs. Then we have the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1882, and this picture is taken from a newspaper. America is very happy that the Chinese are now excluded, and virtually no Chinese are allowed into the United States. And one reason why this happened, or a major reason why this happened, was because Chinese immigrants were building the Transcontinental Railroad, especially out west, and there was this fear that Chinese immigrants were taking jobs. Then we have the APA in the 1880s and the 1890s, or the American Protective Association, and this was especially anti-Catholic. And members would actually have to take an oath that they would not vote for a Catholic politician. And if there were two Catholic politicians running against each other, they would cross off a name and write in somebody else to vote for. So lots of anti-Catholicism happening. And then in 1907, under Teddy Roosevelt, we have the Gentleman's Agreement. If you remember, think back, dealt with school segregation in San Francisco. The Japanese government was upset that Japanese students were forced to go to their own school. So Teddy Roosevelt helped get that policy repealed in exchange for the Japanese withholding passports. So the Japanese voluntarily reduced the amount of immigrants coming to the United States. Okay, staying on the nativism theme in the 1920s, we're going to talk about the Ku Klux Klan, or the KKK. During this time period, membership is increasing drastically, so much so that it's about 5 million people in the United States in the 1920s, and they would have rallies and parades quite often. And as you see here in Washington, D.C., we have thousands of KKK marchers. So why is the KKK, why is their membership increasing, and why are they gaining popularity? Well, it's a reaction to new immigrants. Remember, new immigrants are those that come from Southern and Eastern Europe, like Italy, Croatia, etc. And we also have a full-length movie by D.W. Griffith called A Birth of a Nation, and it glorifies the KKK. This is basically the first full-length motion picture in American history. And if you just look at the poster here, you see a KKK member on a horse, and he looks like he's basically a knight from the Middle Ages. He looks, or is appearing to be, this chivalrous person. Obviously not the case whatsoever, but this movie really influenced a lot of people and helped spread the ideas of the KKK. So much so that even President Woodrow Wilson was a fan of this movie. So what were the KKK's beliefs in the 1920s? Well, they have hatred and hostility towards African Americans, much like they did during the Reconstruction period. They're also focusing on immigrants, Jews, and Catholics. KKK members were predominantly Protestant, and they disliked Catholics. And eventually, due to some scandals, membership declined. In the 1920s, we're going to focus on two immigration laws, or immigration quotas. And the first was the Emergency Quota Act of 1921. Now, this can be a little tricky, so hang with me as I hopefully skillfully guide you through this. This restricted the number of immigrants from a country to 3% total people from that country living in the U.S. in 1910. Now, here's a very famous political cartoon. You have all these people from Europe trying to get in here, but Uncle Sam of the U.S. is restricting them to only 3%. So I'm going to give you an example. These numbers are made up, but it's just to prove the point here. So, for example, if there are 1 million Italians living in the U.S. in 1910, only 30,000 Italians could immigrate as a result of this act. So it limits them. Remember, 1910, that number is based on the census. Every 10 years, every year that ends in a zero, there is a census. This is friendly to Southern and Eastern Europeans, or new immigrants, because in 1910, that's really the height of the new immigrants. So there's lots of immigrants coming into this country at that time. So nativists want to fix that. We have something called the Immigration Act of 1924. So we're sticking with these quotas still, but the quotas for foreigners was cut from 3% to 2%, and they used the 1890 census instead. And this hurt new immigrants because in 1890 there were fewer new immigrants. This was really the beginning of new immigration. In 1890 there would be fewer Italians living in America compared to 1910. So for example, let's say there's 100,000 Italians living in America in 1890. Now only 2% or 2,000 Italians could immigrate as a result of the 1924 Act. So 1924 is much more restrictive. Please know it goes from 3% to 2%, and also know the census year changes from 1910 to 1890. So for the why here, why is this hurting new immigrants? Because it's going back in time to a previous year, prior year where there's less immigration, and it restricts it from 3% to 2%. Now, with the passage of these two acts, unrestricted immigration is now officially over. We won't see another immigration act, a major one really, until the 1960s. Now, let's recap really quick. Why did business owners, especially in the 1880s, 90s, during the Gilded Age, why did they once favor unrestricted immigration? Why did business owners like immigrants? Did you guess because they were cheap workers, a cheap form of labor, and they were hard to unionize? Then you are correct. Nice job. All right, last example of nativism that we'll focus on is the trial of Sacco and Vanzetti. Who were they? They were two Italian immigrants that openly proclaimed to be the following: anarchists, which means they're against all forms of government; atheists, which means they don't believe in God; and draft dodgers, which means they don't support being drafted into any war. These three things really terrified a lot of Americans living at that time. What were they charged with? Well, they were charged with stealing some money and with murder. So two very serious crimes. So how is this an example of nativism? Well, most people agree they did not receive a fair trial. There was lots of inconclusive evidence. Radicalism became a major issue during the trial. So it wasn't so much did they murder somebody, it was this idea of them being anarchists. So their political beliefs were introduced a lot during this trial that really had nothing to do with the case at hand. So the jury and Americans really focused on that they were these extreme anarchists or radicals. And they had several attempts, I believe, at least two attempts for a new trial, and both of those attempts were denied. All over the world, we see protests for a new trial for fair treatment of Sacco and Vanzetti, and unfortunately for them, in 1927, both men were executed. And later in the 70s, the Massachusetts governor basically came out and said they did not receive a fair trial. So strictly because they were new immigrants and radicals, many believe they were killed as a result of the trial. Okay, that's it for this short video. I hope it helped. If you have not already, please subscribe to my channel. If you could take 30 seconds and post this video on Twitter or Facebook, or tell people to subscribe to my channel, I would greatly appreciate it. Any way you can help spread the word, I would really, really appreciate it. And also, again, please visit, if you have not already, APUSHreview.com. All these videos will be up there, worksheets for the videos, and a lot of short biographies on key people you will need to know for the AP exam as well. And many times a week, if not every day, I'm updating the website, so please check back there often. Thanks for watching, and have a good day, guys.